Kenta sat beside the lantern long after it was lit. He watched its flame dance quietly. It cast gentle shadows against the wooden walls and reflected faintly in the snow outside. He began to notice something strange. The light soothed his breath, slowed his heart, and seemed to warm something within him even as the cold pressed against the windows. Over the weeks, he began to understand that the flame was not only for the hall or the eyes of others, but for the spirit. Sometimes, in deep meditation, he would forget to light it, and yet, upon waking, it would be lit. He asked the abbot again, "Who lights the lantern when I forget?" The abbot smiled. "It lights itself when the heart is awake." Years, Kenta grew older and the monastery quieter. One snowy evening, a traveler lost in a blizzard saw the light. He followed it and found refuge. Another time, a woman burdened by grief climbed the hill and sat in silence beside the glow until tears turned into peace. Kenta, now grey-haired, watched the lantern as if it were a companion. "Thank you," he whispered, "for never leaving." When he passed, the monks feared the light would die with him. But the next night, the lantern was still burning. And it burns still within all who remember it. Even the smallest light can guide us home. You carry that flame within you. Rest now and let it glow softly in your dreams. The sparrow and the stillness. In a sleepy village nestled between quiet fields and whispering trees, there stood an old tea house. The tea master who lived there, Master Rin, was known not for his words, but for his silence. Travelers often came to sit with him, not to ask questions, but to share in his stillness. One spring morning, a young wanderer named Kai arrived at the tea house. His eyes were restless, his shoulders heavy with questions he had carried for years, about life, about purpose, about peace. "I have searched across rivers, deserts, and cities," Kai said, bowing deeply, "and yet peace eludes me. Please teach me how to find it." Master Rin said nothing. He poured tea with graceful hands and pointed to the wooden deck outside the tea house, where the morning sun warmed the planks. Kai followed him out. There they sat side by side beneath a wide old maple tree. Time passed. Birdsong danced through the air. The wind sighed through the leaves, and then, suddenly, a sparrow landed just a few feet away. It hopped along the edge of the deck, pecked once at a seed, and tilted its tiny head toward Kai as if in greeting. Kai smiled, but then his thoughts returned. His mind spun with the noise of unspoken questions. He turned to Master Rin. "What must I do to quiet the noise inside me?" The master simply raised his hand and pointed again to the sparrow. Kai turned. The bird had stopped moving. It sat now in complete stillness, eyes half closed, feathers ruffled by the breeze. It was doing nothing. It was simply being. Kai blinked. No striving, no seeking. The sparrow was not waiting for answers, not chasing meaning. It was only present, utterly and fully, in that tiny, breathless moment. And suddenly Kai realized he had stopped thinking. He felt the breeze as it was. He heard the silence as it sounded. He noticed the warmth of the sun on his skin, the weight of his body grounded on the wooden floor. Peace had not arrived from a distant journey. It had been there all along, waiting in the stillness between thoughts. He closed his eyes, and like the sparrow, he simply was. Later that evening, as the stars unfolded over the quiet hills, Kai bowed to the master once more. "Thank you," he said, "for teaching me without words." Master Rin smiled gently and whispered, "Stillness is always speaking. We only need to listen. Now breathe in the silence. Let your thoughts settle like leaves drifting to earth. Let your breath be soft, your spirit light. You are the sparrow. You are the stillness. Nothing to fix, nothing to chase. Only this moment, and this moment is enough." The cloud that forgot to rain. High above a tranquil valley where rice paddies shimmered like mirrors under the sun and herons glided just above the water's skin, there drifted a small, soft cloud. It was not large like the thunderclouds of summer storms, nor bright and swift like the morning wisps that vanished with the sun. This cloud was different, full, gentle, and quiet, but the cloud carried a sorrow. It had never rained. It watched the trees below, stretching their arms upward, saw the cracked earth thirsting beneath the heat, listened to the songs of frogs calling for the return of water. But the cloud remained dry. It floated from valley to forest, over lakes and fields, wishing it could give what the others did. It watched its brothers burst with thunder and light, watched its sisters scatter pearls over the petals of mountain flowers. But it held its water in. "I must be broken," thought the little cloud. "I must be less than I should be." One day, as it drifted over a quiet monastery carved into the slope of a mountain, it paused. Below, a Zen master was sweeping the stone steps with a long wooden broom. His movements were slow, steady, each stroke part of a rhythm older than memory. The cloud hovered silently, watching. After a while, the master looked up and bowed slightly toward the sky. "You are kind to shade us," he said, smiling. "Even the sun must rest sometimes." The cloud trembled. No one had thanked it before. It had only ever been blamed for not doing enough, not being like the others. "But I haven't rained," the cloud whispered. The master set his broom aside and sat on the stone steps. "You think your value lies in what you do," he said gently, as if answering a voice from the sky. "But your presence, your being, is already a gift." The cloud floated in silence. "I have watched you," the master continued. "Each afternoon you drift above us. You cool the air, you soften the light, you bring comfort by simply being." The wind passed, soft and kind. The cloud did not need to burst. It did not need to rain. It simply remained, cool, calm, sheltering the world with its quiet shade. And over time, something magical happened. Children played longer in the fields without the sun scorching their skin. Crops grew stronger, spared from sudden heat. And at dusk, the villagers would pause and look up with peaceful smiles. They did not ask the cloud to change. They simply received what it offered, a calm sky, a gentle quiet. You may think, but your stillness, your quiet presence, is already a comfort to the world. You are not forgotten. You are not broken. You are enough, just as you are. Float gently now and rest. The rock and the feather. Once, in a deep forest where the trees stood tall and time moved slow, there was a small open glade where light touched the earth like water falling over silk. In the center of this glade sat a large weathered rock, moss-covered, still, unmoving. It had rested in that same place for centuries, watching the seasons come and go. Birds nested nearby, rabbits passed without fear, and the wind bowed gently around its form. The rock never spoke, never moved, but always was. One morning, as dawn broke and golden mist hugged the treetops, a feather drifted down from the sky. Carried by the faintest breath of wind, it danced in circles, sometimes rising, sometimes falling, until at last it came to rest atop the rock. The feather was light, delicate, barely there. It had once belonged to a white heron that flew above the clouds. Now it lay still, silent, without purpose. At first, the feather felt lost. It had moved with the wind, soared in the air, lived in flight. Now it was grounded. Beside the rock, its stillness seemed strange. "Do you not long to move?" the feather asked. The rock said nothing. Time passed. Days melted into one another like drops of dew in the morning grass. The feather began to notice the rhythm of the forest, the way the light shifted without rush, the way the trees swayed without leaving their place, the way the rock simply remained. "I was always afraid to be still," the feather whispered. To stop moving was to disappear. The rock did not reply. It didn't need to. Birds returned, perching atop the old stone. Rain fell gently and rolled off its curved sides. In winter, snow blanketed both rock and feather, and they lay together under the soft hush of the white world. One day, the wind returned, playful, gentle. It tried to lift the feather again, coaxing it back into the air. But the feather no longer fluttered with the same urgency. It had learned the weight of stillness, the value of presence, so it stayed on the rock, quiet, grounded, complete, and the forest bowed around them both. You may be the feather, light, wandering, unsure where to land, or you may be the rock, still, enduring, unnoticed. But within you is the wisdom of both. There is peace in movement and peace in rest. Let yourself land. Let the moment hold you. You are not lost. You are home. The Master's shadow. In a quiet village nestled between green hills and winding streams, known for his deep calm and soft laughter. He wore robes that carried the scent of cedar and incense, and his sandals made barely a sound as he walked the temple paths. Each morning, just before the sun rose, he would walk through the village alone. No one knew where he went, but everyone noticed how his presence made the air feel lighter, as though the very sky bowed when he passed. One day, a young student, eager and full of questions, followed the master at a distance. He wanted to know the secret of his teacher's peace. Surely there was a sacred chant, or a magic phrase, or some mysterious ritual that the master performed in secret before dawn. Silently, he followed. Through gardens wet with dew, along narrow dirt roads and under bamboo arches, the master walked without hurry. His robe brushed the wild grass. His breath matched the rhythm of the breeze. But there was nothing extraordinary in what he did. He stopped now and then to watch a dragonfly rest on a reed. He touched the bark of a tall pine. He stood beside the river, eyes closed, listening to the sound of water weaving over stones. The student remained hidden, puzzled. He saw no sacred practice, just walking, pausing, breathing. When the sun finally crested the hills, casting golden light through the mist, the master turned and spoke softly, without looking. "Why do you follow my shadow when your own walks beside you?" The student froze. The master smiled and stepped closer. He pointed to the ground where both shadows met. "You already walk the path," he said, "but you chase it as if it is always ahead." The student's eyes filled with tears. All his life, he had tried to be like someone else, to mimic, to match, to follow. He bowed deeply, his forehead touching the earth. That day, he walked back alone. But it was not the same walk. It was slower, softer. He noticed the way his own feet met the ground, the way his breath steamed in the cool air, the way his shadow moved with him, always beside, never behind. You do not need to become anyone else. You do not need to catch up. You are already walking the path. Your presence is the practice. Let go of the chase. Let your own shadow guide you home. Rest now. You are enough, just as you are. The candle in the wind. There once was an old temple perched on the edge of a wind-swept cliff. The sea lay far below, breathing in long, slow waves that crashed against ancient stones. The wind never stopped there. It whispered, howled, sighed, and sometimes even sang. It moved through the temple halls like a ghost, curling around wooden beams, tugging at prayer flags, and brushing the cheeks of meditating monks. In this temple, an aging Zen master lived alone. His days were simple. He swept the stone steps, boiled rice, and sat in silence for hours. Each night, as dusk turned the sky to silver, he lit a single candle in the meditation hall. It was not an ordinary candle, it was a teaching. The flame flickered gently in the breeze that always found its way through the cracks in the walls. Most would think it foolish to light a candle in such a place, but the master believed that peace was not the absence of wind, but the presence of stillness within it. One evening, a traveler arrived, a young woman worn by the road, her face tired, her eyes searching. "I've been walking for many days," she said, "looking for peace." The master welcomed her with warm tea and quiet company. When night fell, he led her into the meditation hall. There, on the altar, the small candle burned, its flame dancing with the wind. "How can it stay lit?" she asked. "It should have gone out by now." The master sat beside her and said nothing at first. Then, in a voice as soft as silk, he answered, "Because it does not fight the wind, it moves with it." They watched the flame together. It bent, it bowed, it leaned so far it seemed it would disappear, but it always returned to center, never resisting, never afraid. The young woman closed her eyes. She breathed in the scent of beeswax and cedar. She listened to the ocean far below. She felt the breeze move through her hair, across her skin, around her heart. That night, as she slept near the temple garden, she dreamed of a candle that floated on the wind like a feather, never blown out, never still, but always alight. In the morning, she thanked the master. "I thought I needed to escape the wind," she said, "but now I see I only needed to learn how to burn within it." The master bowed, and the wind carried her footsteps away like petals down a stream. You are the candle. Life may blow through you, softly or with storm. Do not resist. Bend, breathe. Return to center. Let the flame of your being flicker with grace. Even in the wind, you can remain a light. The deer in the mist. It was said that deep within the ancient forests of the East, where tall cedars whispered secrets and moss grew like soft emerald blankets, there lived a deer unlike any other. It was rarely seen, but when it appeared, it moved like mist, light, silent, almost unreal. A young monk named Aya had heard the tales. She was told the deer was a symbol of true enlightenment, graceful, elusive, always near, but never caught. One morning, when fog curled thick around the monastery and the world seemed made of breath and shadow, Aya walked into the woods alone. The trees stood still, their trunks like quiet sentinels. The forest floor was damp beneath her feet. Her breath rose in slow clouds. She listened, for twigs snapping, for the whisper of hooves, but there was only silence. Hours passed. She followed no path. She moved as the mist moved. Then between two ancient oaks a shape emerged, soft and silver, with eyes like polished amber. They came to a clearing where the mist thinned and sunlight broke like gold through the trees. The deer stopped. It bowed its head once, as though in blessing, and then it vanished into the veil of fog. Aya stood alone, and yet she did not feel alone. She realized then the deer had never been a prize to be captured. It was a reflection of her own stillness, her own presence. It came not when she chased it, but when she moved gently, without desire. She returned to the monastery without a word, but in her silence, others noticed a change. She walked lighter, breathed softer, and when she sat in meditation, even the wind seemed to still. Let your breath be light. Let the mist rise around your thoughts. Do not chase. Just follow gently. The deer is already within you. The Whispering Scroll. In the heart of a sun-warmed monastery, where paper lanterns swayed like dreams and the scent of sandalwood lingered in every corridor, there was a hidden scroll kept deep in the abbot's study. No one knew what the scroll said. It was wrapped in silk, tied with faded thread, and placed on the highest shelf. Monks would sometimes glance at it in passing, their curiosity flickering like candlelight, but none dared touch it. Except for Jun. Jun was the youngest monk, full of questions and quiet wonder. He often swept the floors beneath the shelf, glancing up at the scroll. Its stillness called to him, not with urgency, but with the soft tug of a breeze through rice fields. One rainy morning, when clouds wrapped the monastery like a cocoon and thunder echoed far away like a distant drum, Jun asked the abbot, "Master, may I read the scroll?" The abbot smiled gently. "When the time is right, the scroll will open for you." Jun returned day after day. Not to read, but to sit, to sweep, to breathe beneath the shelf. He began to notice the subtle rhythm of the raindrops on the tiled roof, the way the wood creaked beneath his feet, the way silence curved around the space where the scroll sat. Seasons passed. Jun grew taller, calmer. He no longer asked about the scroll. He had come to love the waiting. Then one night, when the moon hung low and full outside the paper walls, Jun felt something stir in him. He stood, walked to the shelf and reached for the scroll. The silk was soft, the thread untied easily. The parchment inside was aged and fragile. He unrolled it slowly, reverently, expecting words, lines of wisdom, instructions, poems. But there were none. The scroll was blank. Jun stared. His heart, for a moment, sank like a stone in still water. Then he heard it, a whisper, not in his ears, but in his chest. A soft echo of every breath he had taken beneath that shelf, every moment of stillness, every step he had swept in silence. The scroll had spoken, not through ink, but through presence. He rolled it back gently, placed it on the shelf, and bowed. From that night forward, he carried the scroll within him. Not all wisdom is written. Not all messages need words. Listen to the silence between thoughts. It speaks in stillness. Let go. You already know. The fox and the fruit. In a quiet village at the edge of an old pine forest, there was a garden said to bear the sweetest fruit in the land. No one knew who tended it. The trees were heavy with golden pears and plums the color of twilight. And yet no farmer claimed the harvest. The villagers whispered that the garden was watched over by a spirit, clever, elusive, and wild. One summer evening, just as fireflies began to blink in the tall grasses, a young monk named Rin came upon the garden. He had been walking for days, seeking nothing in particular, only peace. The garden drew him in like a dream. He stepped through the low gate, which swung open without a sound. There, beneath a pear tree, sat a fox. Its coat was the color of sun-drenched rust, its eyes bright and knowing. The fox did not run, it simply watched. Rin bowed. The fox tilted its head as if amused. Then, without warning, it leapt into the branches of the pear tree. A single golden fruit fell at Rin's feet. He picked it up. It was warm in his hand, as if it had captured the heat of the sun. He raised it to his lips, but before he took a bite, the fox barked once, sharp and clear. Rin paused. The fox sat and looked at him, as if waiting. Rin lowered the fruit, and in that still moment, something shifted inside him. He realized the fruit was not for eating, not yet. It was an offering, a mirror, a pause. He placed it gently on the ground and sat beside it. The fox blinked slowly, approving. They sat together in the garden, no words, no action, only presence. As night deepened, moonlight spilled over the fruit, and Rin saw his own reflection in its golden skin, calm, patient, undemanding. By dawn, the fox was gone. Rin stood, bowed again, and walked away, leaving the fruit untouched. He was no longer hungry. Sometimes what we seek is not meant to be taken, but to be noticed. Let go of grasping. Sit with the gift. The sweetness is already within you. The falling star. In the high mountains of the east, where clouds curled around stone peaks like silk scarves, a small temple clung to the cliffs. It was a place few had visited, and fewer still had stayed. The air was thin but clear. The winds sang lullabies to the snowdrifts, and each night the stars seemed close enough to touch. A young Meiji lived alone in that temple. He tended the fire, swept the stones, and listened to the silence. Each evening he would climb to the highest rock behind the temple and sit there, wrapped in his robe, watching the stars blink open, one by one, like ancient lanterns. One night, as Keiji sat in his usual place, he noticed a streak of light tear across the sky. A star, bright and fast, fell toward the horizon, trailing silver threads. Keiji did not move, he simply watched. The next day, he walked down the mountainside to the forest below, drawn by a quiet pull in his chest. Deep in the trees, where moss grew like velvet and mist curled around the roots, he found a clearing he had never seen before. At its center was a small crater, no wider than a bowl. Inside it lay a smooth black stone that shimmered faintly with silver light. He sat beside it. Days passed. Keiji returned to the stone each morning. He never touched it, never disturbed the earth around it. He simply sat and listened. Sometimes the wind through the trees would whisper like voices just beyond hearing. Sometimes a squirrel would pause and look at him with curious eyes. But mostly, there was stillness. One morning, as the sun filtered down in soft golden threads, Keiji noticed something. The stone no longer glowed. Its shimmer had faded, but inside him something had brightened, a small light, quiet and steady. He smiled, bowed to the stone, and left the clearing for the last time. He understood now the star had not fallen for him to possess, but to awaken something within. Let go of chasing the light. Be still. The star is already inside you, shining even when the sky is dark. The echo in the cave. In the northern mountains, where fog drifted like ghosts through the valleys, there was a cave spoken of only in whispers. The villagers called it the Echo Cave, not because it echoed sound, but because, they said, it echoed truth. Monks from nearby temples occasionally ventured to its mouth, but few dared to enter. They believed the cave did not simply repeat your voice, but reflected your innermost self. To speak within it was to hear yourself, not as you imagined, but as you truly were. One such monk, a quiet man named Haru, set out to visit the cave in mid-autumn, when the maple leaves blazed red and gold, and the air smelled of change. Haru had practiced meditation for years, yet a restlessness lingered in him like a leaf that would not fall. He reached the cave at twilight. The entrance was low, hidden behind a curtain of moss and twisted root. With a bow, Haru stepped inside. The air was cool, damp, and still. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. He lit no candle, for the cave seemed to welcome darkness. Sitting on a flat stone, Haru inhaled and exhaled. He spoke softly. "Who am I?" The cave was silent. Then a moment later, the cave whispered back, not with words, but with breath, not with answers, but with stillness. The silence echoed his question. He asked again, "What do I seek?" A drop of water fell. The cave did not answer. Hours passed. Eventually, Haru stopped speaking. He stopped asking. He listened. And in that long silence, he heard something rise, not from the cave, but from himself. Not words, not sound, but a quiet knowing. He was not a question in need of an answer. He was the space between the questions. He was the cave. When he emerged, morning light painted the world in gold. He bowed to the entrance and whispered, "Thank you." He did not need to return. The echo was within him now, steady and calm. Sometimes the world does not answer with sound, but with silence. Let that silence fill you. Let it echo gently through your heart. You are not the question. You are the stillness that holds it. The Bridge of Silence. There was a quiet village nestled between two hills, divided by a gentle river that shimmered under the moonlight like liquid glass. Across the river stood a narrow wooden bridge, simple in design, ancient in spirit. No carts ever crossed it. No shoes clattered over its planks. It was known as the Bridge of Silence. The villagers told stories about the bridge. Some said it was built by monks who never spoke a word. Others claimed it was a place where the heart could be heard more clearly than the tongue. Regardless of the tale, one rule was clear. When you crossed the bridge, you did so in silence. A young novice named Mika had heard of the bridge her whole life. She was curious, restless, filled with questions and thoughts that spun like leaves in the wind. One quiet evening, she asked her teacher, "Why is it that no one speaks on the bridge?" Her teacher, a gentle woman with eyes like deep water, only smiled and said, "Walk it, and tell me what you hear." So Mika rose early the next morning, before the sun had kissed the rooftops. Mist hung low over the fields, and the world was hushed with dew. She reached the bridge just as the first birds began to stir. She placed her bare foot on the wood. It creaked faintly, then held her. With every step, she listened, not just with her ears, but with her breath, her skin, her stillness. The river below moved without urgency, brushing past stone and root with a sound softer than a whisper. Midway across the bridge, Mika stopped. She could hear her own heartbeat. She could feel the warmth of the rising sun through the mist. She could sense something she had never noticed before, a silence that wasn't empty, but full of presence, of peace, of truth. There were no thoughts loud enough to interrupt it, no questions needed, only breath, only being. She stood there for what felt like an eternity, though time had slipped its name. When she returned to the temple, her teacher asked gently, "What did you hear?" Mika smiled, eyes misted with calm. "Everything," she said, "and nothing." The path to stillness is not paved with words, but with presence. Let the noise fall away. Let your breath guide you. You are already on the bridge. You have always been. The tree that did not grow. In a quiet corner of a mountain temple where sunlight filtered through tall pines and the wind sang softly through the leaves, there stood a small tree. Or rather, it tried to stand. For many years, it had remained no taller than a monk's knee. Its branches were thin, its leaves sparse. Around it, other trees had grown tall and wide, reaching for the sky with eager limbs. But this tree, this quiet, stubborn tree, remained just as it had always been, small, still, and waiting. The monks cleared the moss around it and shielded it from frost in winter. But still it did not grow. Some of the younger monks laughed and called it lazy. One suggested transplanting it to richer soil. Another whispered that perhaps it was cursed. But the abbot said nothing. Each morning he would stop before the tree, bow gently, and sit beside it in silence. A young monk named Sora, curious and impatient, finally asked, "Master, why do you sit with the tree that does not grow?" The abbot smiled and motioned for Sora to sit. "Watch," he said. And so Sora sat. They stayed beside the tree all morning. The breeze stirred the grass. Birdsong echoed from the hills. A butterfly landed on the tree's delicate branch. The tree, though small, stood steady. Its bark was firm. Its leaves caught the light in a way that made them shine like emeralds. Its roots spread earth, unseen but strong. Sora said at last. Nodded. Withered, it does not envy that it stands, and so it is perfect. Years passed. Sora continued to visit the tree every morning. He began to notice how it changed, not in height, but in grace. How it held snow in the winter without breaking, how it welcomed bees in the spring, how it offered shade to tiny in the summer, and how, each autumn, it let go of its leaves with peace and poise. Sora stopped measuring the tree. He simply sat with it, and in time, he too stopped measuring himself. He simply was, like the tree. Growth does not always look like reaching higher. Sometimes it means standing steady, being present, rooting deep. You are not behind. You are not late. You are enough, exactly as you are. The clay cup. In a valley shaped by time and quiet rain, there lived an old potter named Amai. He was known throughout the villages for his clay cups, small, simple, perfectly curved. No two were the same, yet each felt like it had always belonged in one's hand. Each morning, Amai would walk to the river and collect a small bundle of clay from the banks. He moved slowly, like the sun over the hills, bending to the earth with reverence. The clay was not just dirt to him, It was a story, a breath, a stillness waiting to be shaped. One day, a young monk from the mountain temple came to visit. His name was Daichi, and he had heard tales of Amai's work. He bowed deeply and said, "Master, I've come to learn how you make your cups." Amai nodded and said, "Then you must first learn to listen." He gave Daichi a lump of river clay and said nothing more. They sat together on a mat of woven reeds. Daichi pressed and shaped the clay with clumsy fingers, eager to form a perfect cup. He molded one, then another, but they cracked, tilted, collapsed. He grew frustrated. "Master," Daichi sighed, "mine are never right." Amai smiled gently. "The clay does not need you to be right. It needs you to be quiet." That night, Daichi slept beside the small kiln under a sky scattered with stars like scattered grains of sand. The wind hummed in the trees. In the stillness, he began to feel the clay-esque softness in his hands long after he had set it down. He noticed the slow rhythm of his breath matching the flow of the river nearby. The next morning, Amai handed him a cup. It was worn, chipped slightly at the rim, stained from years of tea. "This is my first cup," he said. "I made it when I was a young man, full of fire." Daichi turned it over in his hands. It was rough, uneven, but there was something in it, an honesty, a warmth, a cup that had lived. "I kept it to remind myself," Amai continued, "that beauty comes from patience, from time, from being present, not perfect." Daichi bowed again, deeper this time, not out of respect, but from gratitude. In the months that followed, he made many cups. Some cracked, some broke, some sang when tapped gently. Each one taught him something: how to let go, how to breathe, how to hold without squeezing. And eventually, he made a cup that felt like silence in his hand. He returned to the temple not with a masterpiece, but with a clay cup that held more than tea. It held understanding. Not all things must be flawless to be full. Even a chipped cup holds warmth. Even your quiet moments hold wisdom. Let yourself be shaped gently by time. You are enough as you are. The lantern without flame. In a remote village cradled between the folds of ancient hills, there stood a small temple made of cedarwood and silence. The monks who lived there moved like shadows in a dream, soft and deliberate, speaking only when words were lighter than breath. Among them was a novice named Kiko. He was young, not the quietness that hung around the temple, like morning mist. One evening, the master handed him a lantern, unlit, and said, "Take this. Go into the forest. Walk until you no longer seek the path." Kiko stared at the lantern, its paper sides pale as moonlight. "But master, it holds no flame. How will I see?" The master only smiled and turned away. So Kiko went. The forest was dense with hush. Trees bowed in stillness, their leaves whispering riddles only the wind could hear. He walked and walked, each step swallowed by the mossy earth, each breath drawn into the rhythm of the night. The lantern was light in his hand, swinging gently, though it gave no glow. Still he followed some quiet thread inside him, not the trail, not the stars, but something more ancient than either. Owls blinked from branches, a stream hummed nearby, the moon hid behind drifting clouds, and darkness wrapped him like a robe. At first, Kiko hesitated, but then he closed his eyes, and in that moment he saw, not with sight, but with presence, not with eyes, but with awareness. The forest no longer loomed, it welcomed. The dark no longer threatened, it cradled. Kiko sat upon a stone, the lantern resting beside him like a friend who needed no words. And there, in the breath of trees and night, he began to understand.
The lantern had never been empty. It burned with stillness. It glowed with trust.
It was lit not by flame, but by surrender. When he returned to the temple at dawn, the master was waiting. "You found your way," the master said. Kiko bowed. "And lost it too." The master nodded. "Then you are ready. Let yourself drift now. No path to follow, no light to chase. You are held in the stillness. You are the lantern. You are the flame. And the dark is your friend." The pine that waited high on a quiet mountain where clouds danced through the trees, there stood a solitary pine. It had grown not in the forest, but alone on a rocky outcrop where soil was thin and the wind was always speaking. Other trees grew in clusters down the slope, their roots tangled like conversation. But the pine, it stood apart, unmoved, watching the seasons breathe. It was said the pine was once a seed blown from a great forest. Where it landed, no other trees would grow. And yet it waited, patiently, for rain, for sun, for the mountain to make space for it. And slowly, over many years, it did. There was an old monk who often visited the pine. He would sit at its base with a cup of hot tea, the steam curling into the air like incense. He never spoke to the tree. He only listened. One day, a young traveler followed the monk up the trail and found him seated there in silence. The traveler looked at the tree and frowned. "Why do you come all this way to sit beneath one tree when there is a whole forest below?" The monk took a sip of tea and replied, "Because this tree knows what it means to be alone and not lonely. It did not chase the forest. It did not curse the wind. It waited and became itself." The traveler sat beside him, unsure of what to say. The wind whispered through the pine's branches, slow and low like a chant. Years later, the traveler returned to the mountain, this time alone. The monk had long since passed, but the pine still stood, taller now, wiser. The traveler laid a hand on its bark and closed his eyes. He could feel the patience in its roots, the stillness in its spine, the knowing that comes only from waiting without need. He whispered, "Thank you for growing slowly. Now breathe with the pine, rooted, quiet, deep. You need not rush. You are becoming. Even in stillness you grow." The bowl that held the sky. In a valley where mist lay like silk upon the fields each morning, there was a potter's village known for its simple beauty. The potters there made bowls, thousands of bowls, each one quiet in its purpose. But one potter, old and nearly silent, worked differently from the rest. He made only one bowl each season. When asked why, he simply said, "It takes time to make a bowl that can hold the sky." Most did not understand. The villagers watched him sit for hours, sometimes days, before he ever touched the clay. He would stare out the window at the sky, not just the color, but the movement of clouds, the stillness between birds' wings, the hush of wind before rain. Only then would he gather the clay, his hands slow and listening. The bowl he shaped was always plain, no patterns, no colors, just a curve so soft, so perfect, that it seemed to disappear when placed beneath the open sky. A young apprentice once came to him and asked, "Bowls." "Sit," he said, "and look." The boy sat in the field, the bowl in his lap. The sky was wide and cloudless, the air still. He tilted the bowl, and the sky reflected faintly in its curve. But as he stared, something strange began to happen. The bowl no longer held water. It held silence. It held the vastness of breath. It held the stillness that only sky could know. The boy forgot the bowl. He forgot himself. There was only space. When he returned to the potter's hut, He said nothing. The potter nodded. Now you've seen. From that day on, the apprentice made fewer bowls, and in each one he left a little more space. Let your breath be the bowl. Let your chest rise like the sky. There is nothing to hold, only room to receive. You are enough. You are spacious. You are sky. The lantern and the moth. In a remote temple nestled between rice fields and winding stone paths, there hung an old lantern on the wooden veranda. The lantern had no flame inside it. It had once glowed brightly with a gentle oil flame, lighting the temple's wooden corridors during long nights of chanting and quiet sweeping. But now it was empty, a hollow shell of metal and rice paper swaying gently in the evening breeze. Yet every night, without fail, a single moth would arrive. It fluttered in slow circles around the empty lantern, landing softly on its fragile edge, resting its wings like folded silk. No flame beckoned it, no light warmed its path. Still it came. One evening, a novice noticed the moth's nightly visit. Curious, he asked the head monk, why does the moth return when the lantern no longer shines? The monk smiled and replied, because once the lantern held light, and something within the moth remembers. That night, the novice sat beside the lantern as the moth arrived. Its wings trembled with age, yet it circled with grace. It did not seek fire, it simply kept the memory of glow alive. The wind was soft and full of crickets. Moonlight fell like dust on the wooden floorboards. The novice closed his eyes and felt something stir in his chest, a warm flicker that needed no flame. In the stillness, he understood, some things glow even after they are gone. The lantern didn't need to burn to be full of light. Breathe gently now, feel the warmth you carry even in darkness. Not all light is seen. Some is remembered, and some is simply felt. You are the lantern. You are the moth. You are the glow. The garden that grew by itself. Far beyond the mountain villages where the rivers run like threads of glass, there was said to be a garden that grew without hands. No one planted it. No one watered it. No one pulled a single weed. And yet it bloomed. Travelers who had wandered through that quiet place returned with softened hearts and faraway eyes. They spoke of moss-covered stones that hummed with peace, of trees that bent in gentle arcs like they were bowing to the wind. Wild flowers of every shade appeared in perfect patterns, though no human arranged them. A young monk named Riku, seeking the truth of the stories, asked his teacher for permission to find the garden. The teacher gave a single nod, and Riku set off at dawn with only a rice ball and a promise to listen deeply. He walked for days, through bamboo forests that whispered like water, across fields where dragonflies hovered, motionless in sun, over hills that sang when the wind passed low. Finally, in the hush between two breaths, Riku stepped into a clearing, and there it was. The garden. It was not grand, not cultivated like a temple garden. It was wild, soft, dreamlike. Stone paths had formed by the gentle tread of deer. Ferns opened like sleepy hands. A small stream wound through the heart of it, gurgling secrets to the moss. He stood still, afraid to move. Then, slowly, he sat on a flat stone and watched. Birds landed without fear. Leaves drifted down like forgotten prayers. There was no need to understand. He stayed for hours, or perhaps days. Time didn't seem to notice him anymore. When Riku returned to the temple, his teacher asked, "What did you learn?" Riku smiled gently and replied, "Some gardens grow because no one tends them. They grow from stillness, they grow from letting be. Let your breath fall like a leaf. Let the garden of your heart grow without effort. You do not need to tend every thought. You do not need to fix the wild. Peace grows when we allow." The master who forgot his name. Long ago, at the edge of a silver lake where mist lingered until noon, there lived a Zen master so old that even he could not remember how old he was. His beard had grown like woven threads of snow, and his robes were patched so many times that not a single original stitch remained. But he smiled often, not from joy or sorrow, but from something softer, deeper, like the warmth of a hearth with no fire. One morning, a student approached him with concern in his eyes. "Master," he said gently, "you left your scroll in the garden last night, and yesterday you forgot your sandals at the river. Today you do not even answer when I call your name. Are you forgetting everything?" The master looked up, puzzled for a moment, then chuckled softly. "I suppose I have forgotten many things," he said, brushing dew from the sleeve of his robe. "But the more I forget, the lighter I become." "But your name?" the student asked. "Isn't that important?" The old man stood slowly and walked with the student to the lake. The surface was glass still, mirroring the sky. Birds sang like they were whispering secrets only the water could understand. "Look into the lake," the master said. "Do you see your reflection?" The student nodded. "Can the lake remember your name?" "No." "And yet it still reflects you." The student blinked. "So, we do not need names to be seen?" The master smiled. "We do not need names to be known." They stood there, side by side, watching the ripples spread out from a single falling leaf. Time, like the water, moved without direction, only rhythm. That night, as the stars began to braid themselves across the sky, the student sat in silence. He no longer needed to call the master's name. Being near him was enough. His presence was like moonlight. It lit the world gently, needing nothing in return. Let go now. Let go of names, of roles, of stories. You are not what you're called. You are not what you remember. You are what is still when all else fades. You are here. You are whole. You are the reflection and the sky. The monk and the sleeping tree. In the heart of a forest where the moss was thick and the light filtered down like threads of silk, there stood an ancient tree unlike any other. It was so large, so wide, so still, that the villagers called it the sleeping tree. Its bark was deep grey, wrinkled like folded mountains. Its branches reached out not with urgency, but with ease, as though stretching in the midst of an endless dream. Birds rarely sang on it. No fruit grew from it. And yet, year after year, it stood, watching, breathing, dreaming. One spring, a wandering monk came upon the tree after losing his path in the woods. He had no map, no meal, no words left in his heart. He had wandered for days, weary and unsure, seeking a sign from the universe. But the world had remained quiet. Now before him stood the sleeping tree, wrapped in soft shadows. He sat beneath it. He did not ask questions. He did not meditate. He simply rested his back against the trunk, closed his eyes and listened. And the tree in its silence began to speak. Not in words, but in weight. In the warmth of the bark, the softness of the moss, the hum of insects moving through roots unseen. The tree was not in a hurry. It had never been. It had grown not through effort, but through stillness. Days passed, The monk stayed. He felt his thoughts slow down. His worries became fewer. His breath matched the rise and fall of the wind through the high leaves. A child from the village once passed and asked, "What are you doing under the tree?" The monk opened one eye and said, "Sleeping." "But your eyes are open." "And so is the tree's." The child giggled and ran off. The monk smiled, then turned his gaze upward, watching a single leaf twirl down, soft as a yawn. By the time the monk left the forest, he was no longer looking for a path. He had found something better, a pause. Let yourself be the tree, rooted, still. There is no path to follow right now, no place to go. Only this moment, soft, quiet, and enough. The teapot that poured the sky. In a village cradled between rolling hills, there lived an elderly woman named Asa, who made the finest tea in all the land. Travelers spoke of the calm that would fall upon them after just one cup of her brew. No matter how far they came, from mountain paths or busy markets, they would leave her small tea hut, feeling as if they had forgotten what they were rushing for in the first place. But Asa had a secret. Her teapot was not like any other. It was old, very old, crafted of black clay that shimmered with faint blue when the light struck it, just so. The villagers said it had belonged to a Zen master many centuries ago, and that it was blessed. Asa never spoke of its origin. She only said, "This pot doesn't pour tea, it pours the sky." One morning, a young man arrived, tense and fidgeting. He was a merchant, always in motion, always thinking of the next deal, the next coin, the next gain. He sat across from Asa with his legs bouncing beneath the table, his hands wringing the edge of his sleeves. "I hear your tea can quiet the heart," he said. "I'd like 2 cups, one for now, one to go." Asa smiled, bowed slightly, and began her ritual. She moved slowly, rinsing the cups with steam, measuring the leaves like precious gems, listening to the soft rumble of the kettle. The merchant huffed, checked the sun's position, tapped his foot, and then she poured. The tea flowed like golden smoke, curling from the pot in slow ribbons. The scent of it was unlike anything the merchant had ever known, warm, soft, like a memory he didn't remember having. He took a sip and stopped. The wind outside grew hushed. The rustling of leaves slowed to a whisper. The steam rose upward, and he followed it with his gaze, up through the thatched roof, through the trees, into the sky itself. He forgot to speak. He forgot to plan. He simply breathed. "What is in this?" he whispered. Asa poured herself a cup and looked out the window. "It's just tea," she said. "But the pot remembers the sky. When you stop chasing, it shows you." They sat in silence for a long time. The second cup was never poured. The merchant never asked for it. When he left, he bowed deeply. He did not hurry down the hill. He did not look back. That evening, Asa cleaned the cups and held the pot close to her chest. It was warm, not from the fire, but from something older. The pot gleamed faintly as if the entire sky had sunk inside. Sip the moment gently. No need to reach, no need to chase. The sky is here, in the breath, in the stillness, in the teapot of now. The paper lantern that burned no more. In the heart of an ancient town, wrapped in river mist and plum blossom scent, there stood a small temple, known only to those who walked slowly enough to notice it. Outside the temple gate, there hung a single paper lantern. By day, it looked like nothing more than faded parchment stretched over a bamboo frame, humble, unassuming, touched by rain and sun. But by night, when the sky turned ink black and the frogs sang their watery lullabies, the lantern glowed with a light so soft, so steady, that even the stars paused to admire it. It was said that the lantern had burned for over 80 years, never once extinguished by wind or storm. People whispered that it was lit with the flame of a monk's final breath. The monk's name was Haku.
Long ago, when Haku was young, he wandered into the town with no belongings but a worn robe and a heart full of questions. He swept floors at the temple. He cooked rice and washed bowls. He bowed to the rain. He meditated with the morning crows and fell asleep to the sound of the river brushing stones smooth, but he could not quiet his restlessness. One night, while sitting beneath the moon with his old master, he asked, "When will I find my light?" The master smiled, not at the moon, not at the boy, but at the silence between their breaths. Then he said, "When you stop trying to burn."
Haku did not understand. Not then. He thought his light would come from effort, from perfect stillness, from long meditations and longer fasts. So he tried harder, sat longer, ate less, spoke less. Yet the light did not come. Years passed. The seasons slipped by like robes in the river. Haku grew older, softer. He laughed more, wept more. He stopped striving. He no longer sought light. He simply lived. He tended to a sick bird one spring. He rebuilt a fallen fence after a storm. He sat beside a dying man and whispered nothing, only breathed with him until the last breath. And one evening, he took a paper lantern from the storeroom. He lit it without ceremony. He hung it outside the temple, and then he died. No one saw it happen. Only the wind noticed that it did not disturb the flame. From that night forward, the lantern burned with a quiet light. It did not flicker. It did not fade. It did not burn to show the way. It simply was. Visitors would come, sit beside it, and fall asleep without knowing why their hearts had gone soft, or why their worries had stepped outside. Many tried to relight the lantern when the paper grew thin, but they found no wick, no oil, no fire, just light. Still, silent, complete. Let your flame rest. You do not need to burn. You are already light, gentle, steady enough. Let go. Let the lantern glow within you now. The chair that faced the wall, in a mountain temple hidden among red maples and sighing pine trees, there was a room with nothing in it but a single wooden chair. It was not a special chair. Its legs were uneven. Its back was rough. It faced the wall. Visitors who came to the temple always found it strange. "Why does this chair not face the view?" they asked. "The valley is so beautiful." The abbot would only smile and say, "The chair has already seen the view." One winter evening, a tired traveler arrived at the temple. His shoes were thin, his coat patched, his eyes full of cities and smoke. He had come a long way seeking peace, but everywhere he went there was noise, inside and out. He entered the quiet temple. The fire crackled, the floor creaked, nothing else moved. The abbot greeted him with warm tea and silence. Later, when the traveler wandered into the empty room and saw the chair facing the bare wall, he laughed softly. "This is absurd," he whispered. "What lesson hides in this?" But he was too tired to question for long. He sat down. The wall in front of him was plain and cracked, a wash of soft beige and shadow. He stared at it for a long while. Nothing happened. There was no view, no distraction, just stillness. He shifted. He sighed. He listened to the wind slide under the eaves. Minutes passed, then more, and something began to open, not in the wall but in him. His breath slowed, his thoughts thinned, even his name felt far away. In that room, in that chair, something peeled away, like old bark from a tree. He remembered the smell of rain on old stones. He remembered his mother's hands making tea. He remembered the warmth of sunlight on his childhood bed, but he did not cling to the memories. They floated by like fish in a stream, and still the wall remained, silent, bare, watching. The hours passed like clouds. When the abbot returned at dusk, the traveler had tears on his cheeks. "I faced the wall," he whispered, "but I saw everything." The abbot nodded. "The chair has no legs," he said. "It stands on stillness. The wall has no face. It shows your own." From that day on, the traveler stayed at the temple. And the chair? It remained, facing the wall, waited to be seen. Now close your eyes and face your own stillness. There is no scenery more beautiful than the peace inside you. Let your thoughts settle like dust. Let your breath be your view. You are the chair. You are the wall. You are the scene. The pond that held the sky. There was a garden far from cities where no gates stood and no names were spoken. In its heart was a small round pond, so still that birds often mistook it for sky. The water was shallow, no deeper than a man's hand. And yet those who visited the pond always left with deeper peace. A monk named Daiji arrived. He had wandered from monastery to monastery searching for answers. What is enlightenment? What is awakening? What is the true nature of the self? But each answer only birthed another question. He came to the garden at dawn. The mist was heavy, curling through bamboo like breath. He stood before the pond and looked down. All he saw was fog and his own tired reflection. Frustrated, he sat cross-legged beside the water. He waited. The sky turned from grey to gold. The mist lifted slowly, like a veil sliding from the face of a statue. And then, the pond became the sky. Clouds drifted across its mirrored surface. A hawk soared silently overhead, its wings gliding through both air and water at once. Daiji blinked. For a moment, he couldn't tell what was above and what was below. Was the sky reflected in the pond, or was the pond reflecting the sky? He leaned closer and saw his own face rippling gently, framed by clouds. He reached out with one finger and touched the surface. The image broke. The sky disappeared. In that instant, he understood. When the mind is disturbed, nothing is clear. But when the mind is still like water, then everything is reflected. He laughed softly. Not a loud laugh, but a deep one, like pebbles settling at the bottom of a stream. He whispered, "The sky is not above me, it is within me." From that day forward, Daiji no longer chased questions. He tended the garden in silence. He swept leaves from stone paths. He sat by the pond and listened, not to birds, not to wind, but to the quiet in his own breath. Breathe in now, slow and steady. Let your thoughts settle like leaves upon still water. You are the pond. You are the sky. There is no separation, only reflection. Let the silence hold you gently. The bowl that waited in a quiet valley where the wind moved like breath between pine-covered hills, there stood a small temple of stone and wood. Its roof bowed gently beneath the weight of moss, and its lanterns glowed faintly in the early dusk. Within this temple lived Kaito, a monk known not for great teachings or worldly wisdom, but for the way he walked slowly and smiled often. On the lowest shelf in the temple's kitchen sat a bowl carved from cherry wood long ago. Its surface bore the soft sheen of many years, its curves smoothed by 1,000 gentle meals. But in recent seasons, it had not been touched. The other monks, drawn to the newer bowls, passed it by. Still, Kaito noticed it. Each morning, he would pause before the old bowl, place a hand gently beside it, and offer a nod of respect. He never took it, yet he never ignored it. Seasons passed, rain pattered on tiled roofs, snow blanketed the gardens, the cherry trees blossomed and withered, and the wind changed its tune again and again. One spring morning, a traveler arrived. His clothes were threadbare, his face drawn with the weight of long roads and empty miles. The monks welcomed him, offering silence, tea, and a bed in the meditation hall. When mealtime came, Kaito stepped into the kitchen. As if guided by breath alone, his hand reached for the old bowl. He cleaned it with slow reverence, filling it with steaming rice and simple stew. As he carried it across the courtyard, cherry petals drifted through the air like forgotten prayers. The traveler took the bowl in his hands and held it for a long moment. "This bowl," he said quietly, "feels like it has been waiting." Kaito bowed. "It has." That evening, the traveler sat by the pond, the empty bowl beside him. He watched the moon ripple in the water's reflection. And in the stillness, he no longer felt tired. He felt held. Take a slow breath in. Let it rise and fall like a mountain in mist. There is a place for you, just as you are. You are held. You are known. Even in stillness, you are waiting for the perfect moment. The window, without glass, in a hut, high above the clouds, where mist draped the earth like a shawl, lived a blind monk named Haku. Though he could not see the mountains or the sky, he kept a window carved into the wall of his room. It had no glass, no shutters, only open space, cut into silence. When asked why he kept it, Haku would smile and say, "So the wind can pass through me." Villagers climbed to visit him, bringing offerings of tea and honey. They would sit in the quiet hut, confused by the absence of walls, by the openness, the bareness of it all. "You cannot see the view," they would say. "Why do you need a window?" Haku would lift his face toward the opening. "Because I can feel the sunrise on my skin. I can hear the snow's hush. I can smell the plum blossoms in spring. I do not need eyes to see. The window is not for sight. It is for being." At night, the wind whispered through the opening like a lullaby. Owls called softly from the trees, and the stars, though unseen, sang their own silent hymn. Haku's presence became a teaching, a window into presence itself. Those who sat with him began to listen, not with ears, but with hearts. One evening, as clouds turned lavender and the wind danced through the empty frame, a young boy asked, "What do you see, master?" Haku smiled. "I see everything." Let your breath drift like petals on a quiet stream. You are not behind. You are not ahead. You are exactly where you are meant to be. In stillness, everything arrives. The pebble in the shoe. In a quiet monastery surrounded by gravel paths and curling pines, a young monk named Rin struggled with restlessness. His thoughts jumped like wild deer, his patience wore thin like worn cloth, and stillness always felt just out of reach. One morning, while sweeping the garden, he noticed a tiny pebble had slipped into his sandal. It pressed into his foot with every step, an invisible thorn in his journey. He reached down to remove it, but stopped. Instead of casting it aside, Rin decided to leave it. He walked with it, ate with it, sat with it. The pebble became his companion. Days passed. The ache grew familiar, like a soft bell ringing beneath his steps. He noticed how it made him walk slower, more carefully, how it made him pause before rushing. how it brought his attention again and again to the moment. One evening, as the sky blushed with sunset, he finally removed the pebble and held it in his hand. It was smooth and small, unremarkable, and yet it had taught him everything. He placed it gently on the altar and whispered, "Thank you." Breathe as the sky breathes, wide, open, and without end. You are not your thoughts. You are the quiet beneath them. Softly now, return to yourself. The mirror beneath the dust. In a storage room beneath a crumbling Zen temple, hidden beneath old scrolls and cracked bowls, sat a mirror coated in dust. It had not been looked into for generations. Its frame was simple wood, carved with fading lotus petals. Its surface, once polished, now dimmed with years of forgetting. One day, while sweeping, a novice monk named Aya discovered it. She touched it gently, her fingers tracing the outline of time. "Is this worth keeping?" she asked the abbot. He smiled and said only, "Clean it." So Aya sat with the mirror each day. She brought a cloth and water and slowly, ever so slowly, wiped away the dust. First in swirls, then in circles, then in wide, gentle strokes. She saw her reflection emerge faintly like a ghost returning. But what surprised her most was not her own face, it was the room behind her reflected clearly. She saw the beams of the temple ceiling, the dancing candlelight, the petals that drifted from the nearby tree. And then she saw herself, as if for the first time. Not just her face, but the stillness behind her eyes. The abbot came and stood beside her. Aya whispered, "It reflects everything." He nodded. "It always has. Dust only hides, never destroys." She bowed. From that day on, the mirror hung in the meditation hall, not as decoration, but as a reminder, beneath all things clarity remains. Feel the calm ripple through your chest like light on a lake. You need do nothing more. Rest is your teacher. And in rest, you are whole. The path that circled back. A pilgrim once climbed a mountain seeking wisdom. At the summit, he found a small hut where an old monk brewed tea. "Have you reached enlightenment?" the pilgrim asked. The monk poured tea into a chipped cup and said, "I've reached morning walks, warm soup, and sweeping leaves." Unsatisfied, the pilgrim continued his journey. He forests and deserts, through temples and towns. He listened to scholars, sages, and mystics. He filled journals with notes and questions. Years passed. One autumn, tired and grey, he returned to the same mountain. The hut was still there. The monk was older, his hands thinner, his smile unchanged. "I've come full circle," the pilgrim said. The monk nodded, as does the moon, as do the seasons. They sat in silence. Wind rustled the trees. A kettle whistled, and for the first time, the pilgrim did not ask a question. He simply drank his tea. Take a gentle breath like the hush before dawn. Even when the world turns, you remain steady. The path is beneath your feet, even when you sleep. The brush that paused. In a wooden hut nestled within a bamboo grove, an aging calligrapher named Jun practiced his art. His brush moved like wind over still water, forming characters so elegant that even birds paused to watch. Each morning, he would bow to the ink, the parchment, and the silence between strokes. One day, while painting the character for stillness, his hand froze mid-air. The brush hovered above the paper, ink swelling at its tip, trembling like a leaf caught in breathless wind. He did not finish the stroke. a young student watching from the doorway asked, "Master, why did you stop?" Jun smiled without turning. Because the silence said more than the mark. The incomplete character remained on the scroll. Visitors came and marveled, not at what was written, but what was left unwritten. It was a symbol, not of failure, but of restraint, a moment honored. In that empty curve of ink, one could feel the hush of morning mist, the pause before a heron takes flight, the breath between thoughts. Jun never resumed the stroke. It was already complete. Let your mind be like a lantern in soft fog, dimmed, not extinguished, alive but not searching. You are allowed to drift, to trust the quiet. The leaf that floated upstream. A monk named Nari once sat by a stream every morning, watching leaves drift past on the water's surface. Most floated calmly downstream, carried by the current like memories fading into the past. But one morning, she saw a single leaf moving against the current. It turned slowly, bobbing, floating, yet unmistakably upstream. Curious, she watched it for hours. The stream whispered softly, a dragonfly danced nearby, and the leaf continued its journey, not rushing, not forcing, just drifting quietly upstream. Nari followed it on foot, stepping barefoot along the banks. By dusk it came to rest near a stone. She sat beside it, realizing something simple but vast. It was not defiance that carried the leaf upstream. It was the swirl of an unseen current, gentle and deep. Not all things flow in one direction. Not all wisdom follows the usual path. From that day on, whenever she felt herself falling behind, she remembered the leaf and trusted the quiet forces guiding her differently. Close your eyes with the ease of dusk falling on a meadow. No need to chase the answers. They will find you in silence. All is well. You are already home. The shoe left at the door. At the entrance to an old mountain temple, hundreds of shoes lined the porch, muddy, worn, colorful, plain. Each visitor left their pair before entering the meditation hall. But there was always one shoe, just one, never matched. A small, woven slipper placed carefully every morning by an unseen hand. Monks whispered, visitors puzzled. Why only one? An elderly monk named Daichi never answered directly. He would simply smile and sweep the porch, bowing briefly to the lone slipper as he passed. One day, a traveler asked, "Whose is it?" Daichi replied, "It belongs to the one who never fully arrived." Years later, when Daichi passed away, the monks found an old diary. In it, he wrote of a friend, another monk, who once walked with him but had vanished in a storm many years ago. They had shared everything, tea, stories, silence. Only one shoe was recovered. Daichi had kept its place ever since, not from grief, but from reverence. To leave room, he wrote, for those who are still becoming. Inhale slowly, feel the air cradle your chest. The journey is not hurried, the seed waits quietly underground, and still it blooms in time. The sky beneath the ground. In a field where the earth cracked from summer's thirst, a monk named Soma dug a well. Others said it was futile. There hadn't been water there in decades. Still, she dug. Each day, under the harsh sun, her hands blistered, her robes dusted, she carved the earth away. Villagers watched with curiosity, some with pity. "Why here?" they asked. Soma replied, "Because the sky is thirsty beneath us." Weeks passed. Then one morning, as birds began their quiet songs, She struck stone and then water. It came slowly at first, a single drop, then a trickle, then a soft stream rising like breath. She cupped it in her hands and whispered, "Welcome." The villagers gathered, awestruck. Years later, the well never dried, and above it, she placed a simple sign: dig long enough, and the sky reveals itself. Sink into the moment like a pebble into still water. There is no effort in being, there is only breath, and in that breath you are free. The silence between bells. In a temple known for its great bronze bell, visitors came from far villages to hear it ring. Each evening at sunset, the monk Aiko would strike it once. Its deep hum rolled over hills and rice fields, echoing like thunder softened by velvet. People waited in silence for that sound. But one evening, Aiko did not strike the bell. The visitors stood still waiting. The wind rustled, a crow called, the bell remained still. After many moments, Aiko stepped forward and spoke softly. Tonight, the silence rings. Some grumbled, others waited longer, but a few began to notice something unexpected: the rhythm of their own breath, the chirp of crickets, the pulse of their thoughts. That night, the silence was deeper than sound, and the next evening, when the bell finally rang again, it seemed not louder, but quieter, because now they heard what came after. Breathe like the trees breathe, slow, steady, ancient. You are made of stars and rivers. Even silence knows your name. Tonight, you belong to the hush between heartbeats. Welcome to this gentle journey into the heart of Zen. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts drift like clouds over a quiet sky. Tonight, you are invited to step into a world of calm, a world where ancient stories whisper the stillness of the present moment. With each tale, allow yourself to soften, to settle, to float gently towards sleep. This is your time. This is your peace. This is your path into rest. Let us begin. The sound of one hand clapping. In a quiet monastery tucked into the mountains of Kyoto, there lived a young monk named Shoji. Shoji had a question that haunted him, given to him by his master. What is the sound of one hand clapping? Day after day, Shoji wandered the stone paths between the cherry blossoms, listening to the wind. He clapped his hands alone, but it was never quite right. One hand was silence, one hand was mystery. One evening he sat by a stream where the water kissed the rocks with the gentlest murmur. The sun was folding itself behind the hills, and the world was dipped in golden mist. He watched the water ripple gently around stones, the golden glow softening every edge. Shoji began to realize the world spoke without words. The stream murmured secrets. The trees offered their patience. Even the mountain, unmoving, told a story of stillness. In that silence, the answer felt close. A